Sermon title for today is Try Jesus. Try Jesus. Some of you may think, well, I know this is not revival. It sounds like the sermon title to a revival sermon, Try Jesus. So maybe the pastor thinks there will be some visitors here today and people who are not part of the church, and he's going to be speaking directly to those people. Because all of us who are members of this church, surely we've already answered that call to try Jesus. But that's not accurate. The sermon is not for the minority, it is for the majority. It's not for the few, it's for the many. It's not for the non-member, it's for the non-member and the member.
Amen.
Try Jesus. And let me explain why. I'll begin with the scripture. Now large crowds were traveling with him, and he turned. So where are they? They're following him. They're in close proximity to him. These are people who are going with Jesus. They're walking with Jesus. They're there, I'm sure, because they want to see what's going to happen next. What's he going to do? I just can't believe what we've already seen. Let's go. Let's travel with him. The camaraderie, the conflict when people challenge him and he answers them. The hope, the joy that they see in people's faces who are healed and blessed in so many ways. They are traveling with Jesus, but yet Jesus turns to them who are following him and challenges them to discipleship. Following is not necessarily discipleship. Membership is not necessarily discipleship. Just because we are here does not mean that we have grown any closer to Jesus Christ than those people he challenged on that day to be disciples.
Amen.
And that's the way it is in our church, isn't it? Since I've been here, people have joined the church and that was their last Sunday. Isn't that amazing? Some people travel for a little bit longer. Some people travel for a very long time and they give up. Like us today is that crowd that Jesus was talking to. And people give me advice sometimes. Well, Pastor, you should do this and you should do that to make sure those things don't happen. But I'm not going to take that weight on my shoulders. I'm not going to carry that guilt and that baggage around. It's not on me. Some of it is on me, but it's mostly on the individual. And notice how Jesus handles it. Jesus doesn't wait until somebody comes to him and says, Jesus, I'd like to join your church. And then Jesus has a dialogue with them and says, well, let me tell you, these are the things you have to. Let me go. No. Before anybody says anything, Jesus turns around and says, hey. If you want to be my disciple, hate your father and your mother. Hate your children. Hate your brother and your sister. Take up your cross. I'm going to die. Things are going to get tough. And follow me. He didn't go through so many things. He went right to the heart of the matter. Jesus did not play games with those who were against him and even also with those who were for him. So he turned and he challenged them. So hopefully you'll be challenged a little bit today. Hopefully that's okay with you. Jesus did it. Jesus is trying to do it all the time with all of us. Call us to be disciples. And disciples, in case you're wondering, that there is two different groups of people. There are disciples, and then there are all the rest of us. And the disciples do the work and make the sacrifice. And then there are those of us who don't have to do any work. We just tag along, and we are just as much blessed as anybody else. You'll only find the word Christian in the Bible 2 times. Other times you find disciple. Jesus didn't send the disciples out to make Christians of all nations. He sent them out to make disciples of all nations. Disciple is the word used for all of us. When Jesus speaks about disciples, he's talking to all of us, whoever wants to be my disciple. There is not two groups of people. We're all called to be disciples. The other time that Christian is used in the New Testament, it's in 1 Peter. And Peter says, if you suffer as a Christian, you could almost read it to mean that he is saying it in the way that the world uses about disciples, because that's the way it's first used in the book of Acts, when the writer says they were first called Christians at Antioch. But he doesn't say they were first called Christians. He says the disciples were first called Christians at Antioch.
Amen.
God calls us all to be disciples. This message is for us all who want to follow Jesus. Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and even life itself, cannot be my disciple. I am like you. I got up this morning and I was thankful I was alive. I was glad to have a spouse and children. We treasure those people. We treasure life. We miss them when we do not have them. So I don't think Jesus is saying exactly the way we might take it at first blush. I think what he is saying to us is, don't let anything get in the way of the kingdom of heaven. It's that important. If any of those people, if anything about your life gets in the way and keeps you from what is in store for you, you would be better off to push it away, because it's that important. It is not about hating those we love, but it's about putting them in perspective, putting them in the right place. The moment they get in the way, the moment they trip you up, you need to notice that. And you need to take some corrective action. Because nothing, Jesus is saying, should stand between you and the glory that is to be revealed to you. It's going to be that great. So give those things up. And then he says, whoever does not carry the cross cannot be my disciple. So you give something up. You give up those allegiances that might get in the way, and you take something up. You take up the cross. You take up the struggle. But you take up life. Because that cross is life. That cross is your lifeline to the kingdom of heaven. Without it, you have no life in eternity. It is your life. Paul, I remember trying to figure out, what was Paul preaching? I wonder what is there a sermon in here somewhere so I'll know what to preach? What did they preach in the New Testament? And Paul says, we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and folly to Gentiles. That's my gospel. That's the gospel. That's the good news. That's God's life to you. Jesus going to the cross. Jesus suffering for you, dying for your sins, that you might have life. It's your lifeline. Don't let go of your lifeline to hold on to something that is temporary. Those relationships, those things that we have, they are temporary. They are for this life. There is much greater to be gained in the next life. Much greater fellowship, much greater life, much greater possessions than what we have here. Don't let them get in the way. Cling to the cross. But Jesus explains himself. Hopefully we realize, first of all, that it is worth it. We don't just get a cross, but we get the rights of discipleship. There are things that you gain by taking the cross here on earth. You get all the promises. All the promises are yes in him, Paul says. All the promises that God has for his people, because as a disciple, and there is no distinction, there are not disciples and then children of God. The children of God are disciples. Those who confess Jesus Christ as Lord and follow him. We have certain rights. We have a right to be called children of God.
Amen.
We have a right to the inheritance in the kingdom of heaven. We have the right that God will never leave us alone. He'll never fail you or forsake you. We have those promises. There are good things about being a disciple, but it is a struggle. Jesus doesn't want us to be unprepared and not be ready for what is to come. Take up your cross. It is the symbol of struggle. Isn't it funny that the symbol of struggle, the symbol of death, is what gives us life? And before the cross, the thing that people thought brought them life really brought them death, and that was the law. They thought by keeping the law they could get to heaven, but Jesus says it doesn't work that way. Paul preaches in the New Testament that it doesn't work that way. Because all the law does is shows you where your sins are. It multiplies your sin. And no one can be saved by the law, he writes.
Amen.
So Jesus goes on to explain why this is important, that we take it this seriously. And he tells a couple of parables. And the parables build on each other. They're not parables that go side by side. They're parables, the first one is one parable, and then the second parable builds on the first parable. So they teach different things. They don't teach the same thing, although they sound very similar in what they might teach. And Jesus says, "For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not first sit down and estimate the cost, to see whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will begin to ridicule him." Look at the key words in that. Finish. Finish. What Jesus is saying is that it does you no good to take up the cross today if you're going to lay it down tomorrow or next week or next year or at any time between the time that Jesus comes or you pass from this earth. You have to finish. Jesus is calling his disciples to be finishers, not just starters, not just journeyers. And I think Jesus looks at the crowd. Maybe he knows he is Jesus, he is God. Maybe he knows which ones might be able to finish and which ones will not. But he knows that a lot of them will not. Finish. That's what we're called to do, to carry that cross all the way to the end. The church is not for quitters. The cross is not for quitters. I think Jesus might have put it this way when he turned to that crowd. If you were here today. I don't need cream puffs, I don't need crybabies, and I don't need mama's blues if you're going to be my disciple. It's going to take some commitment. It's going to take some serious work. It's going to take some struggle. And you have to finish. If you don't finish, it does you absolutely no good.
Amen.
And unlike in Jesus' day, when Jesus ends the parable, he says, those who don't finish will be ridiculed. You don't have that convenience today. You could stop coming to church today and probably all of your friends would say, okay, I kind of figured that might happen. Or, you do your thing. If your thing's not church, you do your thing. You're a member, you'll be okay. As long as your name is on the roll, you're good. You made a commitment one day, you went to the front of the church, don't worry about it. Nobody, probably nobody will ridicule you. They'll just look at you and they'll say, you're just like everybody, you're just like the rest of us. That cross is tough. And we don't want to carry it. And we don't have to, and we're not. Congratulations. You will not be ridiculed. You can't expect the world to support you in carrying the cross. It's on you.
Amen.
We want to try to help each other. If you find someone who will help you, that's a good thing. Some people that you can walk with, that's the point of being in a church, that we support one another. Now, let me say this, though. Even as the choir started to sing today's anthem, I almost cried. So I can be a cream puff and a crybaby sometimes. But I know that God is calling me to my own struggle. If I'll sit here and cry over a song, what am I going to do when I get out here and the devil is looking me right in the face? I can't be sitting around crying and emotional. I've got to put on my big boy pants and be ready. Be ready for the fight and for the war and for the struggle. And the next parable Jesus gives is a parable about war. He says, what king going out to wage war against another king will not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000? You wonder why Jesus gave us that situation in that parable? It's a little different from the first parable, but he makes the believer, the one with 10,000, going against 20,000 in the story. And I think what Jesus is saying is, if you don't think that you can take 10,000 and beat 20,000 with my help, I don't need you. If you don't think I can do the impossible, I can't use you. This is all about faith. You've got to believe that you can get up this morning and with 10,000 you're outmanned and you're outgunned and you can take on 20,000 with God's help and win the victory. It's not about us doing it on our own power. We will never finish that way. If you think it's just up to you, if you think it's all by your power and your mental ability and your skill, you'll never make it to the end.
Amen.
But if you know that you've got God Almighty on your side all the time, and he said, here, lock with me. Let's walk together. Put your arm right here, and let's walk together. And I will never fail you or forsake you. If you can believe that, you can take 10,000 and you'll go against 20,000. He can do the impossible. You gotta finish, and there's only one way to finish, and that's by faith. Today and tomorrow and next week and on and on and on. Do you believe it? Amen. Hopefully you came here by faith today. And if you didn't, hopefully you'll leave by faith, knowing that God is the one who is in control. God is the one who has the power. But he's on your side if you walk with Christ, if you take up your cross and follow him. And then finally he says, will not wage war against another king. And then he says, will not sit down and determine whether he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000. If he cannot, then while the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. I learned early in life, thank goodness, although it was a painful lesson to learn, that it wouldn't do me much good to settle. It wouldn't do me much good to make terms of peace with the world. I just wasn't street smart enough. I couldn't make it out there. I got beat up out there. I got run over out there. I was a train wreck out there. And God opened my eyes to see that you can't make it out here. Now, people who can make it in the world, people who can make it on the street, people who have street smarts, Jesus is saying, make terms of peace. Go ahead. Do a deal with the devil. My advice, and I think Jesus' advice, his true advice, would be, like the president say, I remember George W. saying it, we don't negotiate with terrorists. The devil's a terrorist. You negotiate with him, you may get some benefit, but I'm telling you, you're going to have a lot of losses. He is a terrorist. If you want to make terms of peace with the 20,000, with all the enemies, with all the host of the world against you, go ahead, make terms of peace. Be street smart. If you're street smart enough, if you can make it, if you can make money, if you can have what you want in life, make terms of peace. But there's a cost to pay. You will not have life. You will not have Jesus. Whether that street is the corner of Vine and Holly, or whether the street is Hollywood and Vine. Whether you're this low or this high, you make terms of peace, you get the same result. But what I would say to you today is, try Jesus instead. Don't make terms of peace. Try Jesus. Try him. Test him. Put him to work for you. Let go of everything else. Give him your whole heart, your whole mind, your whole strength. Everything you have and everything you are, everything you possess. Make it at his disposal. And what do you want me to do with it? I will not move until you tell me to move. I will not go until you tell me to go. I will not start until you tell me to start. Because I want you to control. I want you to tell me where to go. Try Jesus, I would say. Don't settle for what the devil wants to give. He'll give us a little peace. He'll give us a little comfort. He'll give us a little this. He'll give us a little that. But when he comes after us, it's not pretty. Because there is something to pay in return. He wants his due. He doesn't just give and give and give like God does. He gives and he takes 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 until he has taken it all. Try Jesus instead. And know what I mean when I say try Jesus? I don't mean try Jesus as in, well, I'm going to try him today, and if he doesn't work out, I'll give him up next week. That's exactly the opposite of what Jesus was saying. So the sermon title is a little misleading. Try Jesus. Try and stay with Jesus is really closer to what I'm saying to you today. Let him be your all in all. Make a commitment to him, a greater commitment than you have ever made. If you hear his voice speaking to you, saying to you that there is more to this, that it's not just something you do on the side, but it is what you are all about, answer that call. Try Jesus. Take up the cross, let go of all else, and finish the race with faith. Amen.
Amen.